Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Housing and Real Property Subcommittee. And unlike the full committee, I am not your friendly committee chair. I am, however, your committee chair. We're going to take these bills a little bit out of order, ladies and gentlemen, because of some of the complexity involved. And we're going to do them starting with SB 77 and then go to SB 474, SB 535, SB 686, SB 687. And then after that, we'll try to get to some of the other ones with as much time as we can, because there is a leadership meeting at 4 o'clock. All righty. So let us start with Senate Bill 77, which is a cross file of House Bill 70. House Bill 70 passed the General Assembly 133-2, and the Senate bill that is before us right now passed the Senate 47-0. This is a bill that is a net zero homes net zero homes bill relevant to the Department of Housing and Community Development to give preference to applications for funding for net zero home from the Energy Efficient Home Construction Fund. Matthew, if you could advise us, Matthew, is the Senate Bill 77, which is before us now, is that in the exact same posture as House Bill 70 that we have already passed in the House? Is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Since we've already heard House Bill 70, and we now have Senate Bill 77 in front of it, can I get a motion, please, from someone?
Move approval.
Favorable.
Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on SB 77? Seeing none, all in favor of SB 77 signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Abstentions? SB 77 carries without amendments as a favorable recommendation from the subcommittee. Let us now, ladies and gentlemen, go to SB 474. And SB 474 is a bill relevant to the sale of mobile home parks. SB 474 is a cross file of HB 384, which passed the House 133-2, and SB 474, which is before us right now, passed the Senate 45-0. Matthew, is SB 474 in the same posture as was HB 384?
Yes, sir, it is.
Fantastic. Can I get a motion for there's a motion, there's a second for SB 474.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, any discussion on SB 474? Hearing none, all those in favor of SB 474 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say
Aye.
no. Any abstentions? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. SB 474 will be given a favorable recommendation to the full committee without amendments. We will now go to SB 535. SB 535, ladies and gentlemen, passed. SB 535 is a cross file of HB 593. HB 593 passed the House 117-21, and SB 535, which is before us right now, passed the Senate 45-0. Matthew, can you advise us if the Senate bill is in the same posture as the House bill?
It is.
Move favorable.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on SB 535? Hearing none, all in favor of SB 535, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? SB 535 will receive a favorable recommendation from the subcommittee to the full committee. Let us now, ladies and gentlemen, move to SB 686. SB 686, ladies and gentlemen, is SB 686, ladies and gentlemen, is a cross file of HB 107. Wait a minute, where am I? SB 686 is a cross file of HB 1023, and the House Bill 1023 has a wonderful sponsor of that bill. And that bill passed the House 135-0, and the Senate bill, which is before us right now, SB 686, passed the Senate 45-0. Matthew, would you advise us if the Senate bill that is before us is in the same posture as the House bill?
No, there's actually one slight distinction between the Senate bill and the House bill. The House actually concurred to amendments made by the Senate initially, but added an additional change to move the effective date from October 1, 2021 to June 1, 2021. So the Senate bill still has the October 1, 2021 effective date. Amendment number SB 0686 510611-1 that I sent to you previously would change the effective date from October 1 to June 1 and thus conform to the House version.
So the only amendment then is changing the effective date. So
that's correct.
Let's get the proper procedure going here. Jen, you have a question. Go ahead, Jen.
I'm sorry, I got a little lost in that. About who had the June and who had the October, and I apologize, but I lost that.
Okay.
Ours had June and theirs had October. Ours had
hang on, Jen. We got the question.
Sure.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Sure. So the House Bill 1023 changed the effective date from October 1 to June 1, 2021.
June 1. Right.
As I understand it, I think the Senate bill was also supposed to have a June 1, 2021 effective date. So this amendment would amend the Senate bill SB 686 to have a June 1, 2021 effective date.
There you go.
Thus putting it in the same posture.
Yeah, exactly
yes.
Correct. Is there a motion
Favorable on the
for
amendment.
that? Thank you very much. Is there a second on the amendment?
Second.
Fantastic. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. On the bill as amended, their motion.
Motion.
Favorable.
Second, and there's a second. All in favor of the bill as amended, SB 686 as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? The SB 686 as amended is passed. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let us now go to SB 687. We are cooking with gas, ladies and gentlemen.
We're cooking with renewables, just to be clear. Want to make sure everybody's aware of that. We don't cook with gas. Just
That's
the whole
correct.
idea about cooking with gas is better than cooking with electric. That's all made up stuff so that the fossil
It
fuels
is better.
will convince
It
you.
is really
to
a
burn
lot
fossil
better.
fuels.
If you try
No.
to do both, you know.
So anyway, getting back to
question.
the House.
Propane is a clean fuel. You know that, Hidalgo.
Absolutely.
Whatever burns the biggest, I don't care.
Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on.
Go gas. Go gas.
Let's not have a food fight here, okay? So
It's a
now,
gas fight.
getting back, getting back to Senate Bill 687. Senate Bill 687, ladies and gentlemen, is a crossfire of HB 90. HB 90 passed the House at a vote of 110 to 122. Senate Bill 687, which is before us right now, passed the Senate 45-0. Now, Matthew, can you inform us in terms of how the posture of these two bills are, the crossfires are? Are they in the same posture? And if not, what are the differences?
Sure. The cross files are not in the same posture. There were sponsor amendments to both bills, HB 90 and SB 687, and those amendments are the same. They're identical. You may recall the discussion of HB 90. There were additional amendments added during the subcommittee meeting a couple issues brought up by Department of Housing and Community Development, which were accepted and then adopted by the full committee. So the amendment that I presented to or have before you is SB 0687 940 719-1. And this amendment would conform to the House version of the bill. The Senate sponsor has expressed a desire to conform to the House bill version. So the changes that would be made would first be to delete unused definitions that were added into the bill as introduced. Actually, you know what? Let me share my screen and I will show you because that would be easier.
Well, what is being proposed is that we amend SB 687 to be in the same posture as HB 90.
Yes.
So can I get a motion?
Approval?
That's great. And a second, please.
Second.
Second.
So now we're going to go to discussion. So Matthew, if you can continue very briefly on the discussion of the amendments that we have just voted upon.
Okay. So the amendments would, as was done in the House bill, strike these definitions, which are only used in language that both bills ultimately ended up striking. So they're superfluous at this point. Would conform reporting dates. So if you recall, the House and House Bill 90 changed this reporting date here for DHCD to December 1, 2023, as well as the initial start date for when local jurisdictions would need to include an assessment of fair housing in their housing element of their comprehensive plan, and would establish that the Department of Housing and Community Development shall work in consultation with the Department of Planning to provide technical assistance to a local jurisdiction for the purpose of developing the housing element of a comprehensive plan. The original sponsor amendment had both the Department of Planning and the Department of Housing and Community Development sharing this equal role of providing technical assistance. This would put Department of Housing and Community Development in a consultatory role.
Consultation.
They make them a consultant.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. Now, Delegate Healy, you have a question?
Yeah, I just try to remember about the original bill, and this only affects jurisdictions that have zoning authority, right? It's not just every local government.
If the if the county or municipality creates a comprehensive plan, they would need to do this assessment.
So
But
it
you
would
wouldn't-
affect,
It's
it
a
would
zoning
affect all jurisdictions if they prepare a plan.
Well, but it's a plan for zoning and land use, right? It's not a plan for having housing or rental properties.
It's
question.
the housing element of the comprehensive plan, the comprehensive land use plan. So
That's what my question was, comprehensive land use plan. So
Right.
if a jurisdiction does not do land use, then this would not apply to them. Is that correct?
I'd have to verify. I believe all local jurisdictions, all counties and municipalities do a comprehensive plan.
Well, here's Mr. Pickles. He might be able to chime in.
I mean,
And
we
answer
got
that question.
27 municipalities in Prince George's County, and I'm not aware that they do this land use planning. The
Correct.
county and the the bi-county agency, the National Capital Park and Planning Commission.
And as we recall in the testimony and in the lengthy debate on the floor, the way that these plans are prepared is that the local jurisdiction, and I would assume county, sends the information to DHCD, and then DHCD makes those reports to the General Assembly. So I think that it is going to be the local jurisdictions, in this case, means county jurisdictions. I'm making an assumption here, but Mr. Pickles is here. He can answer that question. Mr. Pickles?
Yes, my understanding is that it applies to every jurisdiction, municipality and county,
All of them. Okay.
all of them, all 180.
180. Okay. So, and each of those 180 would then submit a plan to DHCD. And after that is done, then DHCD would prepare their statewide plan. Is that correct?
More or less, yes. So the half of it fits with their comprehensive plan that they're already doing. And then the other piece of it is that they would feed information to us for us to compile our report.
Okay.
I
That-
think
That answer your question, Ann?
it does not, because I'm still clear that I'm not aware of any municipalities in Prince George's County other than Laurel that has zoning authority that would even do a comprehensive plan of any kind.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure how it could apply to them if they do this kind of plan at all. How can they write a report on something they don't do?
Delegate Lehman?
Yeah, I understand Delegate Healy's confusion, but I read it as jurisdictions, which I think most have a housing plan. Now, we discussed this before, if this is the same bill. This is Delegate Learman's bill in the House, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it is.
And so we had a conversation before. I struck the references to private housing, and I had wondered about the wisdom of that. But this would be, this is my understanding about jurisdictions that have, a housing plan, which is to say some kind of public or subsidized, a plan that includes public or subsidized housing. For example, in Laurel, there is public housing. It's a single, development off of Route 1 and Cherry Lane. In the city of College Park, there is a housing authority that oversees a single senior apartment building called Attic Towers. So I think it's relevant for, this is my understanding, any jurisdiction that has a housing plan, but even more specifically to public or subsidized housing, because it doesn't address private housing. That's my understanding, but unless I missed.
Mr. Pickles, can you clarify?
Maybe. So the bill does not specify what actions need to be taken to show that a jurisdiction is meeting their requirement to affirmatively further fair housing. So it could go if a jurisdiction chooses to get into other areas. It could be as broad as they feel like it needs to be.
But
I surrender. I don't understand it, but I trust.
so go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing to note about municipal corporations in these plans is that under section 3101 of the land use article, municipal corporations can be included as part of a county plan if the legislative body of the municipal corporation by resolution directed to the legislative body of the county where the municipal corporation is located indicates the intention to participate in a county plan, and the legislative body of the county approves the resolution. So it may not be that a municipal corporation is doing all this work, but they could be contained within the county comprehensive plan.
Well, that makes sense to me. That I get. Okay.
So we have before us any additional questions, Ann or Mary? Okay, so we have before us a motion and a second for the amendments. Any additional discussion on the amendments? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed say no. Any abstentions? The amendment carries. We have a motion in favor with the amendment of the bill with amended, as amended.
Move favorable as
Is there a
amended.
second?
Second.
A second. Any additional discussion on SB 687 as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of SB 687 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Any
Hang on a
abstentions?
second. We're
No,
I'm
I
on
don't know.
subcommittee.
Got you. I got you. Wyval,
I'll call you right back.
Wyvils, no.
let me do this. Matthew, can you take down the screen share?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. All right, so I got, oops, let me get this out of here. I've got this thing. So unfavorable, I have Wyval, and I've got Siliberti. Any others voting unfavorable on this bill?
Should be.
The bill as amended carries. That's enough out of you, Mr. Ciliberti.
I'm sorry. You owe me a drink.
Told you I was not
More than
your
one.
friendly chairman here. I'm just a chairman. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now let us move now to SB 144. It's SB 144. Okay. SB 144. Lower your hand for me, Mary. Thank you. You know how easily I get confused. SB 144, ladies and gentlemen, is a bill that is referencing electric vehicle recharging equipment for multi-family units. All right. SB 144, that bill is a crossfire of HB 110, which passed the House 112-18, and SB 144, which is before us right now, passed the Senate 45-0. Now, this bill is not in the same posture. SB 144 is not in the same posture as the House crossfire. So Matthew, could you explain to us the differences between the two bills, if you would, please?
Yes, I'm going to just share my
Share your screen.
Yeah. Here we go. Okay. So there is a common amendment between the two. Both bills struck the MEA grant program, which was seen as duplicative of existing electric vehicle supply equipment of the electric vehicle supply equipment program. So that is consistent between the versions. However, for both condominiums and for homeowners associations, there were additional changes with regard to the requirement to approve the installation of electric vehicle recharging equipment in a unit owner's deeded parking space or parking space that's specifically designated for use by the particular owner. And those changes were that installation would have to be not unreasonably impede the normal use of an area outside the unit owner's parking space and be reasonably possible.
Hang on for 1 second, Matthew. Okay. What you're discussing now are amendments that are on the House bill that are not on the Senate bill. Is that correct?
No, just the opposite, actually. What I have before you is a copy of the Senate
bill. Okay.
Yes. And these are amendments that the Senate made to the bill that are distinct from the House.
Thank you for clarifying.
So again, the first change would be this change from an or to an and, so that both conditions would be required prior to the governing body approving the installation of the electric vehicle recharging equipment. For what it's worth, that may very well make sense. It's unlikely that one or the other of these conditions should be the trigger. As currently drafted, if it were not impossible to install the electric vehicle recharging equipment, then approval could be required, even if the installation unreasonably impeded the normal use of an area outside the unit owner's parking space.
Okay. Go on to the next one.
Now, the next change is reasonably possible. That is distinct, of course, from the House version. As you go through the bill, note that the duty to pay for the electricity, duty to cover the installation costs, get required permits, this all falls on the unit or lot owner. If you stuck with the House language, even if there was an outside chance of installation being possible, it could be very expensive to do so, then approval would be required. In the House version, there'd be this assessment of whether or not installation is reasonably possible. I guess that begs the question, reasonably possible as assessed by whom? But it is a distinct policy choice.
Okay. Now, just so the whole subcommittee understands what I'm going to suggest that we do here. I want to have this discussion today on these two bills and to come back to them tomorrow so we can have a vote on them. But today, I just want to have a discussion on these bills so we all understand what they are doing and how they're different. Okay. So this is a discussion period. A vote on these will be tomorrow. Okay. So continue if you would, Matthew, on 144, SB 144.
Well, that's the distinction.
Okay.
That
So that's a clear distinction. So let me make sure I understand what would happen next in terms of process then. If we as a subcommittee adopt the Senate bill with the amendments, and help me out here, Ann, we adopt the Senate bill with the amendments, and the House bill is different, then once the House bill gets to the Senate then would have to would have to change the House bill to match this bill. And then there would not need to be a conference committee. Is that correct, Ann?
My understanding is, well, that if the House committee accepts the Senate bill as the Senate has presented it to us, we have to make sure that we have an understanding with the Senate committee that they would conform the House bill to match so that they would proceed in identical form. Yeah.
So why don't we go do this then? I'm going to go back to what I said initially. We had this discussion. I am now going to reach out to Senator Will Smith, to be certain he understands what we're going to be doing, so we can make sure both bills conform. Okay. All right.
Yeah. I think that's the best way.
I think you're right. Thanks, Ann, for helping me. So any additional discussions on SB 144? We're going to park this until tomorrow. And again, I will have a discussion with Senator Smith, Chair of JPR. Great. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your cooperation. Let us now go to Senate Bill 401. And again, with Senate Bill 401, if you would allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to have the same type of scenarios on 401 in terms of not voting today, but a discussion today and a follow-up tomorrow for the same reasons that we just parked the previous bill. All right, a little bit of background here on Senate Bill 401. Senate Bill 401, the cross file is very interesting in that all the numbers are the same, but they're in different order. The cross file is HB 104, which passed the House 92-43, and it passed the Senate 30-15. And they're not in the same posture either. And there are some concerns or questions in reference to both of these bills. Matthew, you have something you can pull up on the screen, and I'm going to be asking some of the stakeholders to chime in on this one as well. Matthew, SB 401, please.
All right, so here is a copy of SB 401. There are a number of changes that were made to the bill, to the Senate bill as introduced to conform to some of the things that were done in the House. If you'll recall with House Bill 104, primarily the changes were going through and altering various references to.
I'm sorry, Matthew. Let me start from the very beginning. Give us a brief description of the bill first, and then do the amendment. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I forgot to do that.
Okay, sure. So generally, the bill alters provisions that specify the amount of time prior to the expiration of a tenancy that a landlord is required to provide written notice to the tenant of the intent to repossess the property. This would be a bill of statewide application, and for the effects and changes, there is a very nice sheet in the fiscal note that lays out the change in what is currently the notice period and what ultimately the notice period would be. It is a little different for the Senate bill, so I would refer to the Senate fiscal and policy note for this discussion. There were a number of changes that the Senate bill adopted that the House bill also made. Those were primarily where there's a reference to, say, 1 week or 3 weeks, doing that in the equivalent number of days. Same thing for months, just because a day count was seen as easier for establishing notice and working back from the date of expiration. The changes in the Senate bill version and the House bill version, the House bill version, beyond making those changes in terms of referencing time periods and in terms of days, didn't ultimately change the substantive components of the bill. The Senate bill did. The first change is on page 4, lines 15 through 21. As introduced, the bill established this 2-tiered standard where if a party had lived with a lease for a term or a periodic tenancy of month to month, if the party had lived in the same residence continually for less than 2 years or 2 years or less, there'd be 60 days notice required before the expiration of the tenancy. If the party lived there for more than 2 years, it would be 90 days notice or 3 months notice. The Senate version strikes that dual standard and just makes it a 60-day notice period, which is still longer than current law, which would be 1 month or 30 days if you were just to revise that provision in the bill. But 1 month is what's currently in the statutory text. So that's the first change.
David?
Yeah, Matt, and I don't, forgive me if we covered this on the first bill, but if there is what is the current law if you have a 12-year lease? What is the current law? Because if it's, 12-month lease, because if it's 1 year and at the end of that year, the lease is up, right? So it's
30 days.
Yeah, so basically, if at the end, if the landlord wants to reclaim the property to rent to somebody else for whatever reason, at month 11, they need to send written notice saying, okay, well, your lease terminates in 30 more days.
Yes, it would be 30 days if it was a term lease of 12 months, and then the expectation were that it end at the end of that 12-month period.
Okay, so currently, if they're going to leave, even though the expiration of the lease is 12 months, there's still the landlord is required 30 days prior to send written notice saying, just FYI, reminder, at the end of 30 more days is the end of your 12-month term. So this Senate version would take that to 60 days.
The Senate version would make it, yes, just a
60,
2
that's
months,
correct.
60-day period.
Yes.
In the scenario you provided.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mary?
Thank you. So going to page 5, I printed out a hard copy of the bill. Actually, Delegate Terrazza did that for me. But so I'm looking at my hard copy, and I don't know if the page numbers and the lines still line up in the same way. But on what's my page 5, paragraph 4, line 13. This addresses landlords who have 4 or fewer units. And what I'm trying to understand is it looks like, I think, that this was changed from a requirement from a shall to a may. Am I correct in that? Or is this brand new language to address landlords with fewer than 4 units? And it obviously is a different standard from a couple pages back where the landlord shall provide the notice.
So thank you for that. This is actually the second of substantive change that was made by the Senate. And it is unrelated. This is if a landlord of 4 or fewer dwelling units receives notice of an intent to foreclose on the property under the foreclosure provision.
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah, I realize it's not a renewal, it's a foreclosure, but it is so was the standard in there as a shall? It was required and now it's may, so it's discretionary?
This all is new language that's being added to the current law doesn't anticipate this arrangement, well, the foreclosure and having a different
Okay.
standard for notice to not renew the lease.
So
just-
the language that you're referring to right now, Mary, is not in the House version at all.
In Delegate Stewart's bill, that was going to be my next question.
Yes,
So does this not exist in Delegate Stewart's?
That is correct.
correct.
It does not.
Okay,
Yes, correct.
so it was introduced, it's brand new, introduced like this, where it's may, not shall. Okay, so that's my first question. The second one was just stylistically, Roman numerals 1 and 2 that follow paragraph 4 still have the 1 month, 2 month, and we're not replaced with the days, which is inconsistent with the rest of the,
That is
And-
correct. And anything that we do on this side of the street, we're going to be making those stylistic changes. We are not going to be referring to months. We're going to be making those stylistic changes to days.
Yes.
Everything will be consistent.
Thank you, Delegate Holmes. So one thing to keep in mind is, as Delegate Holmes just mentioned, there's actually, this isn't the only instance where that occurred. There was a separate place, I forget exactly where it occurred, I believe up in this section where because of how the Senate amended the bill, they ended up missing one of the references that changed from 3 months to 90 days. So even if the subcommittee and the full committee and the House were to adopt this version of the bill, say everything is fine, you agree with the Senate, there would still be an amendment, a recommended amendment to make the references to the periods of time consistent.
Now, while we're on this, just before, now I see we got Teresa and Healy, but I wanted to make I feel a lot of feedback. I hear a lot of feedback. Anyway, I want to make a reference again back to the same area that Delegate Lehman brought to us. This section is brand new language. And this section is brand new language because there was a concern by the Senate that was brought to them that added this language. And this particular paragraphs here are relevant to foreclosure action on the landlord.
right.
Not a concern in the House bill, but this is all new language relevant to landlords in foreclosure action, which is just taking place right here. Okay. And now I'm going to go to question. I'm going to get Teresa.
One last question. So procedurally, where are we with, are we just, are we voting on this Senate change? Will we have to like change the House version to, or are we not there yet?
We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Again, as I indicated at the top, we're going to be discussing these today, not voting on these today. I want everyone to digest these changes first. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm finished.
Delegate Teresa.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, I thought we were going one by one, so I'm still back on the first
Yes.
change, the 2 to 3 month, the 2 and 3 months, and then changing that, the Senate changed it just to the 60 days. But I thought there was a very purposeful reason that there were 2 and 3 months. I mean, 3 months is for people who resided in the same home for more than 2 years. And I guess I just want us to, like, while we're discussing it, think about what that means for people who've lived in the same home and are pretty established in the same home for 2 years or more. I mean, they could have been in that house 5 years or 10 years. And they have to pack up their whole homes and lives, find another place to live. And I think the idea was that 90 days was more, well, or 3 months, however this is phrased, was a more reasonable amount of time once you get to that 2 years. So I'm not really fond of that change. I just wanted to add that to the conversation. And then are we on the next one?
And so let's stick with this for a minute. So in the House version, Matthew, here, what did the House version say, Matthew?
The House version had all this language that was struck here. The House version used the language of the bill as introduced. The only change was making this 60 days, making this 90 days.
So in this section right here, Teresa, everything is the same from the House version to the Senate version, okay?
So they're not changing it to, I thought there was a
No,
distinction between.
the Senate version, which we're on, Senate Bill 401, did strike this dichotomy.
There you go,
dual
3 months.
scenario.
Yeah, see line 19. You're right, Teresa. See line 19?
Yeah.
Right, so I guess my suggestion was that we keep the
90 days.
that
Yeah.
dichotomy, because I think that's important
Mhm.
personally.
Agree.
Okay. Okay. Is that it, Teresa?
On that change.
Okay, go to the next one.
So on the next change that we were discussing, I know that that the Public Justice Center had expressed some concern about some concern about a conflict here, and I'm wondering if they could address that, because I'm not sure I completely understand whether the provisions can be read to supersede the post-sale requirements of at least 90 days notice to vacate when there's a foreclosure. I don't know if Matt can comment on that, or whether we could have Zephyr weigh in on that.
Well, let's go to Zephyr. If you're on here, I can't see everyone now. Zephyr, are you here?
I'm here, sir. Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the question, Delegate Terrasa. So, I mean, to Delegate Lehman's point, the may in this provision is, it leaves some ambiguity that I think could just be better drafted. I think that's a may because not every landlord that receives the 45-day notice of intent to foreclose is going to want to send out a notice to quit to the existing tenant. That's why it's a may. I think this is better drafted if it said, you know, if the owner of 4 or fewer properties receives the 45-day notice and is going, you know, basically, this is inartful, but it is going to send out the notice to quit. The notice to quit must provide, you know, 30 days or whatever the Senate came up with. But to the other point that Delegate Terrasa is talking about, as many of you know, because you worked on the protecting tenants at foreclosure legislation a number of years ago, when a property has been foreclosed on and there's a sale, the successor in interest, who may call themselves the landlord, in fact, has to follow a different notice to vacate requirement than what the Senate is proposing here. And that's at least 90 days notice to vacate to the tenant. That mimics federal law as well. So there's some ambiguity here now. When we say landlords in this section, can this be construed by successors of in interest that they are the landlord because they've purchased the property, they have this sort of like inchoate title, they call themselves a landlord. They might be receiving rent before the ratification of the sale. Can they now, under this provision, say, well, I may provide a 30-day notice. I don't have to follow the protecting tenants at foreclosure language anymore. I don't know that that would necessarily happen. I think it's ambiguous, and I just raise it as a red flag that this might be better drafted if the subcommittee thinks this is a very crucial component to put into the bill, to keep in the bill. I think it's worth having drafting look at this again, and I of course I asked Matthew Mickler if what your view of it is, but from our vantage point, it's too ambiguous, and we don't want to see a weakening of the PTFA. Thank you.
To answer your question, Delegate Terrasa?
It does. I think that just a follow-up would be, so your preference would be not to have it in there at all, rather than have an ambiguous, have it in there with the ambiguous language. Is that correct? You'd rather just not see it than have it in there with ambiguous language?
That's correct.
Okay.
Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo, and then Delegate Lehman.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. I didn't forget you, Delegate Healy.
Thank you. Just so I understand, going from 30 days, which is the current notification that a landlord needs to give, to 60 days, which is in this version of the bill, versus up to 90 days
Which was in the House version.
Which is in the House version.
Right.
is there anything precluding the renters from engaging with the landlord earlier, prior to 60 days or 90 days, and extending the lease for a year? So if they go and they say, you know, we want to stay for another year, landlord, and they negotiate another year from that time, then, you know, would that not be the thing to do if you're a renter? Would you not want to just extend it? Would you not
could.
go, hey, my lease expires in 30 days or 60 days and I want to stay, so, you know, Miss Landlord or Mr. Landlord, I would like to renegotiate my lease for another month, for another year.
And the tenant could in fact reach out to the landlord and ask that. I see that. Let me go to, if I can, David, go to Mr. Castelli from the Realtors Association to get his input on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. And to address those points that the delegate just raised, there's nothing to stop any of the landlords or the tenants from communicating about any of this at any point.
Any point.
The point of the second set of amendments, not the 90 to 60 day amendments, but the one regarding foreclosure was in instances where you actually have a landlord that has had a notice of intent. So, and it's structured at trying to limit it to the kind of single family rental properties, 90% of which are the mom and pops. So if they've had a notice of intent to foreclose, many times the best way for a person to avoid foreclosure in an instance like that is to do a short sale. Many lenders are willing to engage in a short sale, but it will depend on a lot of different factors. I will tell you that for many lenders, principal homes are favored in terms of what they would do, but they will work with rental properties in terms of a short sale as well. But it'll depend on what your market price is. And if the notice is extended during that time, the likelihood is that owner who's already behind in payments is now further and further behind, making it harder for the numbers to work out in terms of a short sale. So that was the intent of that second language, or which is to address that situation where you've had, an owner of one of these single family properties, they've had the notice to foreclose. So time is of the essence in terms of them trying to get that sale done in order to avoid foreclosure.
That take care of your questions, David? I see now we still, Delegate Healy, Delegate Lehman, your hand's still up? Okay, so Delegate Healy and then Delegate Lehman.
I actually have two questions.
That's fine.
Two areas of questions. One of them is about what we've been talking about. I was the lead sponsor on all this protection of the tenants in foreclosure. And that was a laborious process to make sure that these protections were in place, because that happened during the whole housing crisis. And one of the issues was that people were paying rent and not realizing that the place had been foreclosed, and that the landlord may have been taking the money and not paying the mortgage. And all of a sudden they're evicted because the place was foreclosed and they get put out. So I don't want to do anything that would undermine those protections that we worked so hard to put in place. So I would very much want to make sure that the advocates and our staff verify that whatever we do does not, disadvantage those kind of tenants in that situation. I'm leery about this language. That's number one. And number two is about the whole issue of going from months to days. There's a reason why some of these things are done by month, because you pay your rent on the first of the month. Your lease is month to month. So having 90 days when it might not be 90 days, or 60 days, it might not be 60 days. So you could have 2 months that are 31 days, that you lose 2 days. I think that we have to be more careful about just wholesale changing everything over. If it's weeks to days, that's fine. There's a set number of days in a week, but there's not a set number of days in a month. And so I would be wanting to be careful about what we accept as far as that goes as well.
Thank you. I do know that in most leases, most leases, when they are written, they make a definition of a month. And in leases, they'll say 1 month is defined as 30 days. And so the language that is being proposed in some of this legislation is just making it consistent with kind of standard practice, I think. But we'll take a look at it.
Thank you.
Delegate, thanks, Delegate Hill. Delegate Lehman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Delegate Healy's point, I'm so glad she raised the past, work that's been done on this front. I hope she will have time to maybe go back and look at whatever law she got passed and determine if this will, undo that in part, because I would not want to agree to that either. That is very concerning. But the question I wanted to return to was the 90 to 60 days and the ambiguity that Zephyr.
Can you scroll back, Matthew? Thank you.
Yeah, the ambiguity Zephyr expressed concern about. Excuse me, I heard him, he didn't, spend much time on it, but in passing said something about a federal standard of 90 days. And, my worry would be that, usually the feds have, a floor, and states are not supposed to go, beneath that. Typically, I guess there are some exceptions. Is that a concern? Because I think if it is, that's more than an ambiguity issue. I don't think we want to go that route.
Well, I think Zephyr's discussion in terms of federal law in the 90 days versus 60 days, that was relevant to the foreclosure procedures, not for this.
Oh, okay. Because we were.
I believe it was with regard to this section and the.
That is correct.
30-day.
Yeah.
We were jumping all around. We were going, and part of that.
That's
was
correct. And I apologize for that. But the federal law area was talking about the foreclosures, not about this particular section we're looking at right now.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I see Delegate Tressi, your hand back up again.
Yeah, I just, in response to Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, I don't know how realistic that is for the tenant to be renegotiating leases or renegotiating and extending leases. I mean, I think that assumes there's not an imbalance of power, and I think there is an imbalance of power frequently. And so I continue to have that concern.
Okay, that's great. Any additional discussion on this particular bill, SB 401? And again, we're going to hold this bill, but I wanted to have this discussion so we can move forward with it again tomorrow. I'm sorry, go ahead, Teresa.
Are those the only two changes? I thought there were others.
So those are the only two distinctions.
Okay, thanks.
Senate and House versions. The other change I was referencing was a few of the instances where 3 months or 2 months were used. They didn't consistently do the 60 or 90 days, whereas the House consistently calculated everything in terms of days from the point of expiration of the lease, mind you.
Right. Okay. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the time that we've spent discussing this, and we're going to have this again tomorrow. I've sent each of you a text message relevant to tomorrow's meeting. So we will be back here tomorrow, and we'll have additional discussion on these two bills and maybe a couple of other ones. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for inundating you with so much information, but that's why we get paid the big bucks, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to conclude now because it's 3:55, and we have a leadership meeting at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much for your participation, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.